Hello everyone, welcome to Calculated. Are you ready? Let's jump right on into it. So here today I am to talk about My Hero Academia, the hit anime from Studio Bones, now in Season 6 and over 120 episodes long. It's a bit of a journey, but I actually tend to think it's a little bit underrated. People have all kinds of different ways of hating on it for like it being cliche or just like all of the other shows out there with nothing particularly special to add. But I'm actually here to say that all of that is kind of wrong actually, because what My Hero Academia does is actually really special. From the jokes it tells to the story and the characters and how everything just kind of fits together by season 6 already, and looks like it's going to shape up to be a brilliant conclusion. There's nothing much to complain about as a whole, so here we are to dive right on into it. Spoiler free to get started, but we're going to dive into spoilers later, so make sure to watch out for that when it comes on screen. I will also give a warning, so to start off, we're going to talk a little bit about just kind of the world building of My Hero. Unlike a lot of superhero worlds, you get used to things like Marvel and DC, where superpowers are kind of all over the place and don't always have a great explanation for themselves. But My Hero starts immediately by telling you that it's a world full of people who have quirks, and these quirks are, in many ways, explainable. Everybody has one, it's a process of evolution, and even though there's a lot of ability to change them up and have all sorts of different combinations, qualities, and they seem to be able to do just about everything, you still understand where it comes from, and you get the idea that there are going to be limits. As the story goes on, it does flesh out some of those limits, but that would be getting into spoiler territory to go into it in depth, so right now just understand that the actual science of My Hero Academia is incredibly well considered and is in all a lot of fun to actually discover. So, to move on, you can think about the world as being this glamorous, exciting place where everything kind of fits together, but it goes a little bit further than that. It takes all of that, and it still decides that, we can take our characters in this world and think about how they would act. People theorize about what quirks actually mean for humanity. Characters think about what kind of careers they can do and how they can use their quirks for their careers. Of course, this being about becoming a hero, most of the characters just think of it in relation to how they can be a hero. But the thing is, there are other ways in which it is touched on, which are actually kind of brilliant. So, with all of this said and done, the world feels incredibly lived in, and is just a fun time. So let's talk about characters and characterization in the show. I just mentioned that we see how people would act in this given world, but the truth is there's a lot more to how characters are built in My Hero that actually allow it to be such a brilliant show as a whole. My personal favorite is it looks at every single person and gives them a little bit of time for you to figure out who they are. Yeah, there's some side characters who come in and off screen without you barely even being able to think about it, but the entirety of Class 1A and all of our main superheroes who they look up to, all of them are fleshed out at least a little bit, and many of them are given room for growth and becoming better people or worse people throughout the course of the story, depending upon if you're looking at the heroes or the villains. But even the villains as characters are completely understandable in their motivations, even if you can still tell they're wrong. This kind of brilliant story writing is something that Marvel has been lacking lately, but it used to actually have, especially in the early phases of the MCU, and if you look back to a lot of the comic books written by our beloved Stan Lee. DC has similar problems with villain motivation, with a few strong exceptions, my personal favorite being Joker in The Dark Knight. We understand where the Joker is coming from, and the truth is it seems like the Joker actually wants to somehow fix crime in the city by attacking the mafia and burning their money and killing lots of people, but still, we understand his position, and we ultimately want Batman to beat him. This is how My Hero works, and how My Hero actually fleshes out every single one of its characters, and it's one of the reasons why it's so watchable, engaging, and exciting throughout the entirety of the show. No spoilers, let's move back on. Just a couple of smaller notes. We also have to give full props to the artist, both for Kohei Horikoshi, who wrote the manga series, because it's absolutely brilliant. You work through every panel, and it feels so fresh, vibrant, and exciting, and it actually builds moments and hype without even having any movement and or music to work off of. Then, of course, the animators take that basic frame-by-frame near perfection and say, hey, but what if it moved, had a bunch of awesome colors, and had a really banging soundtrack behind it? Because the music for My Hero is undoubtedly brilliant, and you can just feel the passion and the energy that went into the actual creation of the piece. And the truth is there's almost no complaints. I'll put a link in the description so you can listen to the soundtrack for yourself. But as you go from season 1, 2, 3, and on, a lot of those original tracks will still appear, but they've been changed up and moved around a little bit so they can be new and exciting, and also with some new tracks that fit in all the time. That pretty much wraps up our spoiler-free portion of the video, so if you're ready to start jumping on into spoilers, I'm glad you've stayed with us this whole time. So let's get ready to rumble. I'm so excited that you could stay this long. So, I'm going to begin this next part of the video by talking about some characters. I feel like that's the best way to really dive into the full epic madness that is My Hero and all of its true glory. So, to do this today, I'm going to take a look at 3 specific characters and kind of prove to you how they actually fit into the story in such a brilliant way. Those being Bakugo, Shigaraki, and Hawks, in that order. Now, these 3 characters all bring different aspects of the story to the forefront of your mind, so I'm going to do it really carefully, and I'm so excited to be able to start with Bakugo. Bakugo is, of course, the fan favorite character in recent years. Character polls show him far and away the most popular, with Deku generally being in second place by a relatively wide margin, and there's some good reasons for this. The main being that he does actually have in his character arc something that almost anyone can immediately connect to. We understand Bakugo, we see ourselves in him, and there are a lot of reasons why. The first reason that comes to mind off the top of my head is that he is a character who has to understand about those around him. He has to go from being, I just want to save the world and be the greatest hero, to going to be the character who's willing to sit down and say, hey, I appreciate those around me. They have value too, and if we work as a team, that's what becomes truly valuable. This is what makes him so powerful when he sacrifices himself so that way Deku can continue fighting Shigaraki in Season 6. His willingness to put his own life, his own physical capabilities on the line for the sake of someone else being able to continue the fight when he is not able really shows how much he actually has grown from being that bully to Deku all the way back in Seasons 1 and 2. He's grown a little bit further and realizes that he does have value, but that others can have value too, and he can still have great aspirations while they have such powerful and importance to the story. It's not just him, others around him matter too. And his willingness to be able to change, to grow, and to become stronger in all of this is what makes him worthy of realistically being the most popular character. He's not my favorite, but I certainly understand if he's yours. To move on to Shigaraki, the main villain in My Hero, and arguably one that is truly brilliant in his creation. The first thing to understand about Shigaraki is that he is a very notable threat throughout the series, from the very first time he appears on screen, all the way up until this latest season of the show, and all the way through the current edition of manga. He is someone who has a threatening presence and a rather fearsome power. This kind of character creation is something that leaves a mark on the reader or the viewer, and one cannot forget that immense power that he shows and how much of a threat he actually poses to the various characters in the show. But the really truly fantastic thing about Shigaraki is not his threat level, but the fact that he is an understandable person. You can know where Shigaraki is coming from as you get to know him more and more and understand his backstory. He wants to change society. He sees the hero society as a broken society, one that needs torn down and changed for the better. And because of this, his rationale is flawed, but we can understand it because his grandmother literally abandoned him and his family because she was a hero. and he sees this as what really destroyed his family, and the lack of understanding in relation to quirks, including his own, is what actually killed them, and then nobody was willing to reach out and help him after the terrible disaster that befell him, just because he was dangerous and a threat to them all. Shigaraki makes sense. He comes off as a little bit of a deprived child with immense power being pushed to the brink of destruction by manipulative adults, namely All for One, then is someone we should really hate, but that doesn't make him any less understandable. This makes him far more human than most villains we see in modern day cinema or books, and this allows us to really actually appreciate him even if we don't like him and still see him as a threat. Shigaraki also grows over the story, not just remaining static as that one basic character note, but he also finds friends and finds support in the League of Villains and does make strides as a character, indicating that, though we're not sure if this could actually happen or not yet, but it is possible that he could become a better person and actually turn to the good side. All of this makes Shigaraki incredibly notable, and basically impossible to ignore as a brilliantly written villain. For my final character dissection, I want to talk about Hawks. Now, Hawks is my favorite character, so I get to talk about him, because this is my video, not yours. Now, if you're immediately complaining and being like, Hawks isn't even that important, well, you're kind of right. He actually is someone who is a little bit less important than our big main characters like Deku and Bakugo and Shigaraki. But he is a good example of how characters with less screen time can still have really well written stories. To just kind of do a quick recap, he's a child orphan who admired heroes, especially Endeavor, notably being pictured with an Endeavor plushie that he found as a kid, and this is kind of one of the things that inspired him to want to be a hero and be someone who others could look up to. And he ended up being recruited by the government due to his incredible power with his wings that he could control, and was raised as a secret weapon in order to do the dirty work of the Hero Society. His role was not a pretty one, nor a good one, and he didn't really even like his job that much. But he did it for everyone else who benefited, so that way everyone else could live in peace and have a happy life, which he was not given as a kid. He wanted to be a great hero like Endeavor, and he's willing to put himself all out there and sacrifice his own ideals and morals to some degree for this sake. Now, there is some moral ambiguity here that I'm not a huge fan of, but it does give Hawks room for growth, and I think we do see a little bit of that in the course of the show so far, though that still has to be resolved over time, hopefully in the manga. Now, sure, his character is one who gets far less time to develop than others, but it is still possible to love him and support him in his struggles and his triumphs. The character writing in My Hero Academia is brilliant, and I think these three examples show it to the full. In the end, many other characters could be examined just like these three. Deku, Ochako Uraraka, Froppy, Kaminari Denki, Endeavor, Twice, Dabi, Mirio Togata, and many more could all easily be talked about in similar ways, either as a smaller character who has a brilliantly written story, or as a larger character who really goes through a rather impressive arc. All of this is done in the context of the beautiful artwork and a very well-designed world. My Hero Academia is thus a stunning triumph, and I think that it is actually underrated by its many detractors, when it should in fact be emulated in the modern media world. Thank you so much for watching my first review video. I look forward to hopefully seeing you again, so make sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, make sure to keep making those calculations. Thank you!